It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Naresh Lakshmandas. Naresh is the former CIO at General Atomics and L3 CSW, and currently a partner and senior fellow at Avasant. Naresh, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Adriana, thank you again. Hello there. Good morning. Looking forward to this exciting interactive dialogue. And as we've shifted from from one crisis into the other, the whole COVID thing, and now this war in Europe, Russia, the Ukraine piece, we're literally living in a complex hybrid crisis, which is critically impacting the global economy and supply chain. Now, as we look back to the COVID crisis, the pandemic really influenced both the cloud expansion, and while organizations moved quickly during the pandemic to respond to increased cloud demands, many still struggle to automate cloud security and mitigate cloud security-related risks. Yet the move to the cloud still continues for companies at all stages, depending on where they are today in their journey, to those who have just started to take advantage of cloud capabilities versus well-established organizations. Those enterprises who have begun their journey to the cloud and enabled digital transformation prior to the crisis were able to be ahead of the competition. It was a transition to work from home. It made their transition to work from home a lot simpler. The culture was already in place. Can we go to the next slide, please? So let's look at some of the research based on Avasant independent assessments of what's going on out there. There are actually some challenges in securing cloud-based systems residing outside the perimeter with direct access from public networks, a lack of visibility across the organizational systems, in secure access controls. How do you control the identity, the federation of the identity across all the different platforms? Data loss is really important because now as we're trying to set up multi-platforms in the hybrid environment, the deployment becomes critical as well. And of course, the inability to maintain compliance across these hybrid platforms, it's really a challenge. Let's go to the next slide, please. With the surge in cloud adoption, security has become even more critical. Again, it's not just about multi-factor authentication and zero trust. That's key. It's also about minimizing exposure from the development of cloud-based software and transitioning to what you're going to hear a lot about today is cloud-native security tools. So what's the real value proposition here? It's basically integrating multiple security solutions across these different platforms, enhancing incident response times, in potentially using some automated response capabilities, some AI capabilities. Again, centralizing the practice for organizing the people, process, and technology within the enterprise to bring them all together, and reducing manual processes and false alarms through, again, advanced analytics. This is really important as we move forward. Things that most entities, struggle with, first recognize what they need to do, but what they need to do moving forward as well. Let's go to the next slide. Now, transformation discussions have always followed the three fundamental pillars: people, process, technology. Now, as we now step into this DevSecOps world with cloud-native apps development to ensure visibility, collaboration, and agility throughout the whole development lifecycle, we need to really incorporate governance as a fourth pillar to successful outcomes. This is really important. So with that, I'd like to just basically introduce the panelists, and thank them for joining us today, and to share their insights and experience with the broader audience. So why don't each of you take a moment to introduce yourselves, your name, your company, your role, and in 30 seconds or less, your experience. So Mike Zill, let's start with you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Mike Zill here, CIO at Acadia Pharmaceuticals. I'm actually CAO as well, and what that extra title stands for is I pretty much get everything that nobody else wants to do, like facilities and procurement and things like that. But just as a way of background, Acadia is a $500 million revenue kind of pharma company. We're focused on developing and helping patients with central nervous system and rare disease. So that's the background. We have a team of about 35 IT professionals, and my background is usually much bigger companies, but this is the first pharma company I've been to, and the first, I would say, fully virtualized company I've been to, and I'll talk more about that later.
Mike, thank you very much. Corinne, your turn.
Hello, my name is Corinne Wycheck, and I'm the Global Channel Solutions Architect Manager for Palo Alto Networks Prisma Cloud Platform. Prior to joining Palo Alto Networks, I spent about 30 years in various information security roles, and I've recently specialized in securing cloud-native environments from build to runtime. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking with everyone today.
Thank you, Corinne. Shri, you're next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sri Kumar. I'm the Global Practice Head for Cloud and Infrastructure Security in HCL. I've been in the industry for about 3 decades, and the last 5 years I've been with security.
Oh, that's wonderful. And folks, as we go through this process, let's make this interactive and let's have some fun. So, Shri, since you're on stage, I figured, as enterprises are looking to fast track the journey to the cloud, I believe they need to rethink their strategies. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, as you said, digitalization has been the buzzword for the last couple of years, and organizations moving to digitalizing their existing processes. And cloud has been one of the key elements to that strategy. And no movement to the cloud, is being undertaken by any organization without looking at the different aspects of the cloud that is getting consumed from different aspects, meaning or the sourcing models, right? It could be an infrastructure as a service or a platform or a software as a service. When organizations shut down their existing data centers, move their virtual machines to the cloud, or subscribing to applications like Salesforce, Workday, etc., or even things like Microsoft Office 365. So what was once in the data center now is being accessed from anywhere, which is literally borderless. So users are everywhere and the applications are everywhere. So this really is what we've been seeing. And again, to securing all this is a very big challenge for all the organizations. So I think what the customers are currently looking for is a unified cloud security story so that they can at least the hybrid cloud and the multi-cloud platforms can easily be managed. That's what we've been seeing, Naresh.
That's great. I remember my old mainframe days. It was all simple. The whole network is contained. You don't have to worry about all these things. But building on what you brought up, Shri, can you take a minute to help us understand why containerization is essential as an enterprise start to operate in a hybrid cloud mode, and maybe what does that mean, and for the audience to get a better feel for that.
Sure, Naresh. If we look a little bit back on history, people were virtualizing the servers from physical servers. They were using solutions like hypervisors or things like VMware, Hyper-V, and all those. What physical boxes used to be there got hosted on a virtual platform. Now, there's one more level of abstraction that has happened, which is in the form of containers, where you're fully making it agnostic. And containers are very small pieces, which is like their own VMs, or it's what you can call it as an application running on a very, very small virtual environment. And you can have hundreds and thousands of them running on a physical server. So that's basically what a container is. Now, why is it very important today when things move on to cloud? Containers have their inherent flexibility that enables companies to probably migrate their applications or split them. Let's call a monolith application, which many of the organizations have. It is easy to split those functions and then host them on containers. And it also gives the performance capabilities like automatically scaling. And that can really help organizations. And again, when one part of the application goes down, it doesn't mean the whole app is down. Certain functions can be down. And there is also a built-in resiliency you might have with all this. So that's probably some of the advantages of containers. However, just a word of caution, this can also be on the flip side. Containers can always grow on a sprawl. Their configurations can be drifting, and because of some misconfiguration, and that's where security also is an area that we need to look at. So the most important thing is the misconfiguration and the compliance needs from a security standpoint have to be looked at. That's basically what I would want to share about this containers.
And these containers, they're able to operate in a hybrid environment, hybrid cloud environment, so it can float from one to the other. Is that a fair statement?
That's absolutely. So one more advantage of containers is, let's say a developer is developing on a MacBook Pro or a Windows device, they can very easily take that code and put it on a AWS or an Azure or a Google Cloud platform without any changes to the code. So it's very easy from a portability standpoint. So that's also one of those key features, Naresh.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that insight. Mike, so in your prior roles, like me, we all grew up with the on-premise world. How are you leveraging cloud today for your business? We'd like to just get some insights from you on that front.
It's quite interesting and fascinating. I was thinking about that for this conversation, and having grown up, I would say in the last couple of jobs, I think I was in an 80% or even higher on-prem environment. And coming into pharma, we've built this world where it's probably 80, even higher percent of cloud-based applications. So we have users coming from everywhere. We have I would say we have 50% of our workload, work in general, let's just call it people, who don't work for the company. They're third party people that we've hired to do things for us, whether it's clinical trials all over the world, et cetera, and they're all interacting with our applications, out in the public. And so in many ways, it's a fascinating thing, but in a lot of ways, it's liberating. And I would say that from my point of view, I don't lose sleep at night, wondering how the data center is doing and, some of those things underneath. I really worry about our data and our documents. I don't worry about a lot of the stuff below that, in the world. And I know we're going to talk more about it, but it's a fascinating change for me. And I actually like it a lot more flexibility, being in the cloud versus being in the sort of the old world of on-prem. So hope that helps.
No, that helps. And from a compliance standpoint, how, given you're in the pharmaceutical world, how are you able to manage and facilitate those across the different, SaaS platforms that you're dealing with?
Well, that's really interesting too. We actually do a lot of things as a service. And one of the things we do is validation as a service. I didn't even know it existed 2 years ago. So as things are continuously changing and continuously, by third parties, we actually have a third party that actually looks at all those changes and makes sure they're compliant with our processes, as an example. So, validation as a service, everything as a service. It's crazy.
That's amazing. Thank you. So, Corinne, turning over to you now. As cloud adoption continues to grow, it's critical that organizations realize that the cloud native security is a living, breathing thing. For many of us who may be in the early stages of the journey, like Mike stated earlier, cloud native security is not about security checks done at a discrete event and what happened at a specific point. Can you set the framework for what this cloud native security means and what structural changes enterprise need to implement and the governance process for security and DevOps teams to work together as you move forward? I know it's a rather long question, but just want to put it out there.
Thank you, Naresh. Yes. So I'm going to build kind of on Mike's story, but on the journey to embracing cloud native security, what I see is that many organizations still depend on the traditional security practices, policies, and the tools that were built to withstand, of course, modern cloud native approaches of scaling and complexity. This may sound a little familiar to a lot of people here. It doesn't exactly fit, our traditional security tooling doesn't exactly fit in our modern day world and around cloud native. So, what do you do? What is that journey? What does that look like? Cloud security has grown increasingly complicated as application development and deployment has also grown for all of us. Businesses implement new cloud applications faster than they can secure them, which is inherently a big problem. And of course, these services become more complex. Security even becomes more difficult. Most cloud security solutions will either limit deployment speed, as kind of what I've seen in the industry, or they're going to fail to cover every aspect that your teams need in a multi-cloud environment. So that's kind of key too, is, we're not just in one CSP, right? A lot of times we have applications across multiple CSPs. So, how do we secure across the multi-cloud? So really, how do you solve for these problems is, I think, where we're all at here. And the answer is to leverage the DevSecOps practices and combine that with CI/CD pipelines, which will enable your teams to respond to security and reliability events quickly and efficiently. Teams will then produce resilient and secure software on a predictable schedule and budget, which is the key word here, is predictable. What I see a lot is organizations wait and do security checks at the end of the pipeline development, right? And that may prevent fast innovation because there could be problems with security at the very end of that pipeline, and thus having to go all the way back to the beginning of the pipeline and have to redo a lot of that code. So, inherently that is affecting the bottom line and our ability to, increase our revenues in a quicker time frame. Although the decision, of course, by management to adopt this methodology may, of course, be easy, the initial implementation, I can assure you, and the ongoing improvement of the methodology can certainly be challenging and could result, of course, in incomplete adoption or ineffective implementation. So what I've seen is that customers that go down this route, they sort of just, we're going to dabble a little here, we're going to do a little bit here, but effectively you can't do that. It's really an all or nothing. Everyone has to be a part of this solution. All teams have to come together, which of course is what, Naresh said in the people process, and they need to holistically work together on a good flow to the CI/CD pipeline, right? That way you're not becoming ineffective. So one, just to reiterate, right, the need to change roles and responsibilities and processes is, a lot of times I see that, right? And that could be the most challenging thing. Of course, Avasant could provide consulting services here if you need assistance, but and as I've been in the industry for 30 years, and as a manager of IT organizations, the DevOps folks really operated autonomously. They didn't really want IT in the way. They didn't want us to prevent their innovation, wait for us to set up systems. So a lot of times they would go at it themselves, right? They would buy their own systems, they would manage themselves. And what I'm talking about here in this framework, that's not possible anymore, right? The two teams really need to come together and rely on each other to create that CI/CD pipeline flow that's necessary to create that faster innovation. So that's the first thing, right? Unification and working together. But the second thing, of course, is, what technology can I use to help with that as well? And right now, so many tools, so many point tools, we'll call them. I find that every customer I talk to almost uses something different. Of course, some synergies, but a lot of different tools. And the tool that's right for your organization is really going to depend on, of course, your business outcome. However strong word of advice and what I see in the industry is a shift towards a platform approach, right? That's really what I see. So think less about point products and try to think about, a platform that can sort of meet all of your needs. And that platform should be able to give you visibility, security control and management across all cloud functions and for all the stages of the software development lifecycle. So kind of culminate everything in terms of a framework, right? The focus should be on the development and operations teams, leveraging the DevSecOps principles and tactics, of course, while implementing the CI/CD pipeline capabilities. You've heard shifting left. That's what we're talking about. Shifting left to a developer-first cloud security.
Yep.
So that's very important.
No, that's thank you for that. Andrea, I believe there's a question for Corinne in the audience. Could you?
Sure. Regarding CICD, what if for some reason the integration fails and the build is broken? How do teams resolve this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're doing CI, I'll break it down because there's CI and then there's CD, right? Continuous integration and then the delivery piece. So if you're doing CI and for some reason the integration fails, that means that the broken build becomes the highest priority to fix, of course, first and foremost. And you can't do anything until, it's in terms of adding more features, right? So you've got to fix the build first. But CI works in 3 simple stages, of course. You've got the push, you got the test, and then you have the fix. So it sounds simple. However, CI might become challenging if only a few members, again, of your team practice it. So CI also requires, of course, that change in culture and needs to be supported by management. The idea is to use here how to fix this, broken build, or how to prevent the broken build from taking a long time to fix. The idea is, of course, is to use the same tooling, process, and configurations in all environments to limit the possibility, of course, of broken builds. That's going to help you out greatly. And then, of course, on the CD side, production is not a special environment. It's just another stage in the pipeline, so you don't need to worry about that. So that's what I would say to that.
Thank you, Corinne. By the way, I'm glad you provide some clarity on CICD. I was Googling it while you were talking. I'm like, what the hell is that? So I apologize. But anyway, so that was, Adriana, thank you for that. But I also noticed, Adriana, there was a question from Jim Rinaldi, a good friend of mine. Could you maybe read that to the panelists?
Yep, sure. How do you manage data in multiple cloud environments if you want to do data analytics across the enterprise? How much value is in architecting for the ahead of deployment versus reacting to the situation as systems evolve?
Does anybody want to take a shot at this? Sri?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Naresh. Yeah, I think everything has to be built from the beginning rather than an afterthought, like what Corinne mentioned. So whatever goes on the cloud, I think the first thing is we look at data, like Mike mentioned. Data is everything today. So first, we really need to look at how do we protect the data and what goes into the cloud. And again, there are tools that are available. A multitude of tools are available with different levels of capability. First of all, we need to understand what is the driver for the data and what data do you have, and how do you need to comply with the regulation. So based on these elements, you can definitely architect some ways around it as you build the environment rather than doing it post the build or post the production. That's what I would say, Naresh.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mike, Corinne, on that one? Okay. All right. So we'll just keep moving ahead. So, Corinne, you mentioned tools and lots of tools in this world. The CICD, from what I heard you talk about, facilitating the CICD model is very complicated, and there's a lot of tools. Are there any tools leveraging AI, machine learning itself to help simplify this approach? What's your recommendation how clients can go through that selection process, or how it can benefit them?
Sure. So this is what I recommend as a best practice. So yes, there are overflowing number of CI/CD tools available on the market. Teams may have to make difficult decisions to pick out the right tools, and also streamlining the number of tools that are used. I would say a good CI/CD tool can leverage teams' current workflow, right? And that current workflow also depends on the skill set really that's on your team too, right? The resources that you have within your organizations. But the idea is to exploit the automation feature and create a solid CI/CD pipeline. So I would say, of course, some of the top tools of the industry, you may have heard of, like Jenkins, Circle CI, Bamboo, GitLab. I'd say, those are the ones that I run across quite a bit that provide a lot of full function capability for CI/CD. But a strong end-to-end platform will have integrations also to these top tools, just so you know. So if you, decide that you want to use Jenkins or GitLab, and they provide a portion of the CI/CD, but maybe not all the elements that you need to have a complete end-to-end security solution, you may want to think about a platform approach. And when you do that, a platform will have these plugins and these integrations to these tools to the greater ecosystem, so that you can create, so you don't have to create, I guess, like the custom APIs and such, because you have to be careful with that. A lot of these tools, if you do, adopt them and then want to work them back into a security platform, make sure that they integrate with one another. Because the vision of a platform for developers and DevOps teams is to secure the cloud native applications and the infrastructure throughout the entire software development lifecycle, which may sound a little bit not how you're doing things today, right? But you want to give your security teams visibility into security posture at every stage, from build time to runtime. So by the time, right, you're done building, it's a great build, you can go ahead and release. There's some agility there, there's speed, faster time to revenue, all the things that, right, we hope for. So a platform investment fixes and prevents misconfigurations in deployed cloud resources and in your infrastructure as a code in the pipeline. And then, of course, I just want to make mention back to maybe some of what Mike was saying. It is very effective in facilitating like zero trust architecture by utilizing conditional access policies, microsegmentation, and continuous monitoring. So I would say that in terms of thinking about your CICD and then the bigger picture of how you wrap in security.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I think, having managed IT organizations like Mike as well, our focus is agility on the development side. Security comes in at the end, right? Given this whole cloud world that we live in, it's important that we're thinking of that up front. And it's a balance between the developers trying to be very agile and create some creative solutions out there, but security has to be top of mind as well. So thank you for that. Andrea, I want to switch a little bit more into security, but is there any other questions from the audience, so we can answer them, and then we'll go into the next step? Anything out there?
Sure. There's a long one. Application modernization and heavy investment platform and management tools continuously try to pull down the ROI for container use. What is the base scale of infra below which one should not consider implementing containers?
Sri, do you want to handle that?
Actually, it's a tough one for me to handle because it goes on an ROI basis, because it's actually the reality is a lot of customers are doing it, and again, the ROI comes back to, we really don't get a view of the ROI from a customer standpoint. I think it'll be good to get a customer's view, because though there are a lot of people deploying containers, they're either doing it on the dev environment initially and then going into productions, because we are in the early stages of doing that. So I think the real ROI is something that we may need to do some statistics like our son's help. If you have a view, that might probably help.
Yeah, to your point, it's the early stages of this new environment, and people need to. It's going to take a little bit of maturity before we get to that point. That's a really good point.
I also think it depends on the size of the organization. I wanted to, write the elements, the resources, what exactly you're doing. There's a lot of different key elements that you're going to have to work into creating that ROI, and it might not be the same for everyone. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, Andrea? Any other questions?
Plenty of questions. Okay. So this one is for Mike. Why did you go all in for the SaaS platform? How did your company accept the operational changes?
I would say we went all in, not because of the IT aspect of it, but because I think our end user base was demanding that we went in. We needed the flexibility of what cloud was offering us. I think that when I look at the world in a small company, and I think this forum is focused on relatively smaller companies, sort of 500 million, billion, in that range, we don't have the resources to do everything we need to do. And so we have to look at other people's resources, other people's money, other people's capability. And so it was an easy decision for us. I think our businesses were kind of pushing us in this direction. Again, it wasn't hey, let's all go cloud cloud first. It was just obvious decisions, one right after another. And IT, I think there's two camps in IT. I'll just get out there and say, as one of the older guys, I like to be able to touch things, and I worry about where my loads are running. I want to be able to see the physical hardware. I mean, that's the world that I'm from. Whereas some of the younger folks are like, yeah, cloud, let's do that. That makes more sense. Why would I want to own something when I can just, use it and have the flexibility, the TCO, the total cost of ownership being less, et cetera, et cetera. So I think depending on where you are in the world, it may not be just a age and experience point of view that's, keeping people back from the cloud. I think it may be more than that, but for us, it was very obvious decisions to go all in. And now that we've done it, I'll just tell you that I sleep well at night. I don't think about a lot of the things. I mean, I have other challenges as we've been discussing, but I think those challenges are very straightforward for us, and they're getting better every day. Our progression in our security space I'm really excited about it. It's super simple to look at, on paper, makes sense from a, I think all security is moving to the cloud anyway in general. Being able to manage managed users and unmanaged users in terms of their hardware is just amazing. I don't know. It's all positive from my point of view in that regard. So I hope that helped answer the question.
Mike, so you really transformed from a baby boomer to a Gen Z. That's amazing.
I'm kind of Gen Z in it. You know, I've definitely got religion on this front in terms of the utilization, and I think businesses are pulling. It's not so much IT pulling. I think businesses are pulling. They want what it feels like to be in the cloud, and that flexibility. I mean, just not having to get rid of hardware to buy more hardware to do something else. Think about that. Just that, where you can just move it, you know, digitally.
And Mike, that's kind of in line with what we started this discussion of, you know, with this crisis, those companies that were digitally transformed or way ahead of the curve are the ones that are excelling and ahead of the competition. So I think that's amazing that you went down that journey with your company. So that's cool. All right, Sri, I'd like to switch gears a little bit. So, you know, what other security controls and monitoring are needed for the cloud workload? What are you seeing out there? What advice do you have for organizations to secure their cloud transformation seamlessly?
Sure. As we look at the cloud, and when we spoke about the cloud, there are multiple layers that we need to look at. When we look at the IaaS layer, we need to look at the host, how they are secured, and then when you move on up the chain, like go into the application layer, then maybe at the data or the identity. So, what we are seeing is customers do have host level protection. Then you have the web front ends protection, either the WAFs, DDoS protection. And those who are running containers or any of the cloud native apps, they're using advanced solutions like CWP and CSPM. Whatever they do, I think there are also the other aspects now. A lot of people are adopting is the certificate-based authentication, which is also sort of picking up right now to make it much more secure. Let's say when you use API, how do you use certificates, and these API calls are made? How do you validate them? Those are also some things that we are seeing from customers. Again, as we see this multi-cloud, a simplified management is what customers are looking for, and it is most difficult as well. And that's why there are some tools out there which we may need to look at. Again, there is no one tool which is going to give. Predominantly, clients are using the native level of control as a step one. And then wherever you have gaps in the native controls, you augment with industry-leading solutions, maybe like Palo Alto, which brings those complementary solutions. And again, on a regular basis to test the compliance, there are things like continuous attack surface monitoring. Those type of things are also something that we have seen recently. So in a nutshell, it's a very tough thing, but we need to be making sure that every level of the cloud or every layer of the cloud needs to be looked at, and the overall security monitoring has to happen across all layers.
And I presume that as you, as HCL, is out there with your clients, you have some sort of a matrix that identifies where things are and where potential gaps are to help them through that journey. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we have something called as a cloud security as a service framework, which we use to sort of assess the customer's current landscape and try to find out what the gaps are. Assuming that somebody has already gone to the cloud, we use that cloud security as a service framework to validate where they are and what controls they can possibly adopt, either on their existing subscription, what they may have, which they may not be using, just to make sure that they don't unnecessarily spend on it. And then also look at some glaring gaps or some compliance requirements which may need some additional tools. So that's how we probably help our customers, Harish.
Corinne, anything to add to that?
I think that was a good summarization, frankly.
Okay. Excellent. So Mike, we've had some very good dialogue on DevSecOps securing the cloud workload. Given that you're ahead of that journey, and with over 80% of your apps leveraging SaaS, what approaches and controls have your organization implemented to securely access cloud resources from any device?
That's a really critical approach for us. We're using the Sassy Zero Trust. That's our framework we're trying to go to. We do use the Palo Alto Cloud in the middle of the earth there. We do have course, MFA and web portal or secure gateway, if you will. We use identity management as well. So all the normal stuff, and we're certificates for managed devices as well. We're doing some of that as you mentioned, Sri. So we're using all the normal suspects here, but pulling it all together in the cloud is starting to make it easier and easier to administrate and to see things. And so I think that's the big difference. We don't want people going directly to Salesforce. We want to take them through this cloud and be able to do things in the cloud, both what we're doing today and what we're going to be able to do in the future. To look at, inspect, and do all the crazy stuff that you can do, as web, that quite frankly, we don't have the money to do ourselves. We couldn't build that ourselves, period, at the size company we are. So I think that Sassy world is a really good starting point for people to look at. And that's our 2 cents.
But any other comments from Sri or Corinne on that?
I think Mike is pretty much right, because it's Sassy is driving, and all these aspects of zero trust also coming along. I think that's the only way we can sort of, when things are going to be across multiple clouds, hybrid, wherever people are, unless you have that zero trust element looked into, it's very difficult for any organization to control and monitor as well.
Excellent. So Andrea, turn it back to you. Any questions from the audience? I think we're at that phase where we wanted to open up for questions from the audience. You're on mute, by the way.
Yep, looks like we have a few more. Okay, Sri, how does multi-factor authentication and zero trust fit into the equation from a security standpoint?
Thank you. That is probably leading on to the previous comment that we made. Anyway, zero trust is all about a couple of key components. One of them is identity. The second one is the policy-based validation. And third is all about visibility. I think these are the 3 key elements of zero trust. So when we look at MFA is more of a subset of zero trust. And that definitely helps an organization, but that's only one of those elements. Then you should anyway have the policy-based checking that needs to happen on a device posture and what are you entitled to access and all those things, which is what moving into the larger. So it may be a first step towards getting into zero trust. Thank you.
Andrea, keep going with the questions.
Okay. How do enterprises manage the compliance within the complexity of the hybrid cloud environment?
I would definitely say look at a platform approach, if you don't mind me jumping in.
Please.
Yeah, so point products, right, can offer you a posture management. But what will it cover all the pieces of compliance that you need throughout? Let's just say if you do have development within your organization, right, it may not look within the code to be able to see if those items are being achieved. So when you think about a platform approach, you'll be able to maintain compliancy across all the different pieces of your cloud workload. So you can have your posture management piece, which is of course risk and compliant. You can have your workload protection, which is going to cover your containers, your serverless, your virtual machines. You can have your identity management piece. You could have your micro-segmentation, of course, and then you can have security in your pipeline and code development. So if you don't look towards a platform approach, you can think about how many tools that's going to take to cover the entire look of your organization. And when you have a platform approach, of course, all these alerts and all these places get funneled into one dashboard. So, you can see everything in one place. You can, be very nimble in your reactions. And we're seeing a lot more of our customer base look towards a platform approach because of that.
So thank you, Corinne. Actually, Corinne, I have another question for you. How often do companies deploy changes? And we heard when you talk about CICD about, there's a balance, a lot of daily, weekly, what's the balance of minimizing deployments versus accumulating change? Because, that's always going to be a challenge when you do agile work. So turn that over to you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, deployments typically happen at least weekly during the source and the build phases. That's what we see. The key, of course, is to set up the CID pipeline with automated steps, and that way you can deploy changes safely to production, and you don't have to watch it, right? It just happens. The pipeline will run the latest changes, which could happen multiple times throughout the week, right? Up until the point where you get to an actual deployment, right? Meaning rolling up to a next version level. So that would be ideal. And you can do that through tests, and you can do it through safety checks. These automated steps, of course, prevent customer impact, which I think is a really key thing to identify here, right? Impacting, of course, defects from reaching production and limiting the impact of defects on customers. So developers are able to trust that the pipeline will, cautiously and safely deploy change into production. That should just happen with CICD. And of course, they won't need to watch it. So, but again, weekly, I would say, from a deployment, and then those changes can happen multiple times during the week with a strong CICD.
Excellent. Thank you. Andrea, any other questions from the audience out there?
Let's see. Okay. I guess this one's for Mike. It looks like, do you have a hybrid cloud model, and how do you manage the security around that, which we've covered, earlier on?
Anything to add to that, Mike?
I don't know. I think it's all been covered quite well, so I don't want to be redundant.
Okay. Again, from a compliance standpoint, I think I asked a question earlier, but Sri, just want to come back to that. How do enterprise manage compliance within this complex hybrid cloud environment? I mean, this is a big challenge. We have different industries. We have, of course, the pharmaceutical side. We have the defense side. Give us some thoughts on that front.
Actually, first thing is maybe the understanding has to be there on the shared responsibility between what we are sourcing from where and what type of resources are we sourcing. For example, the IaaS or PaaS or SaaS, because that comes at different levels of either the compliance, which the service provider, the CSPs might be meeting. In addition to that, whenever there is a need, let's say you just mentioned about it's a healthcare or a government or a manufacturing, each one might have a different type of requirement from a regulatory standpoint or a compliance standpoint. So we really need to utilize some tools, and again, some leading tools give you the standard type of predefined policy templates, I would say. And these are a good point to start. And I think it's very difficult to manage a complex hybrid cloud environment without the use of any tools. And using the tools and using the ready-made or the predefined templates that you have, it cuts across the different industries, which you can eventually take and customize to suit your specific organization requirement, rather than creating everything from the scratch. And that covers your data, privacy, and industries as well. So, I mean, Palo Alto and leading organizations or the product companies definitely come up with a lot of standard templates that can be reused. And that's what we've been seeing with our customers, also making use of those templates and modifying them to suit their purpose.
And are those templates able to adapt to the changing demands that come in from a compliance standpoint? I've noticed a lot of shifts occurring in the last 6 months to a year. How has that been accommodated?
So these templates are continuously getting added on. And when you have a service, anyway, cloud services, you always get the updates. And any changes to these compliance requirements, let's say there is something changed in a certain geography, these templates get updated. And once you try to rerun those scans on those compliances, you'll always get a report on how am I doing from a compliance, and you can very easily address them. So the updates do keep coming.
Templates are definitely key, because you could be running 2,000 containers out into the cloud, for example, but they're all servicing the same sort of testing of a specific piece of application. So inherently, they kind of all need the same security, especially when they're sitting together, same cloud, same pipe, same place. So by templatizing, right, you can easily then be able to secure all of those 2,000 workloads. Because what I find is that companies will say, it's really expensive to secure all my workloads, so I'm only going to secure one or two, out in the cloud, because maybe all the other ones are the same, and so I'll just kind of replicate it out. But again, you've got to be careful with that. You may not get the exact security across all of those different container environments. So again, putting a template in place will allow you to easily be able to do that, maintain security.
And since you guys brought up the containerization component, and I've not coded. It's been many years before I got involved in coding. But how do you guys keep track of what's in there, which ones need to be focused on when it comes to a change in compliance or some security component? Is there some mechanism that you have in place, some tags that are put into those containers?
Without sounding too markety, right, from my product perspective, right, at Palo Alto, we look at all of those elements at a very detailed level. And what you do is you set checks in place. So if there's code drift, right, or something changes, then you can be alerted, and then you can respond to those changes, right? Maybe you make the change, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just deny them and say, nope, we're not going to do it that way. So a tool can really help you do that.
Sri, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's perfect. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. Anything else from the audience, Adriana?
I think we're just about ready for the lightning round. If you want to pop into that. And this is really what we like to do at the end, where we ask our panelists, what have you learned today, and what do you hope the audience takes forward out of the conversation? It looks like we have a few minutes for that.
So who wants to go first?
I'll do it.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so containers are new for me too. I basically have heard about them, and I've never coded with them. I have no idea, but I know every single application we use is using them. So that's a powerful thing to learn. So I learned a little bit about that, but I also realized that it seems the entire world is moving to cloud, and from a security point of view as well. So as our applications are moving to cloud, as our infrastructure is moving to cloud, it makes sense that security follows it. And so I think that we should lean in. That's something I've learned today and been learning through this journey, and look forward to seeing what the future will hold.
Corinne?
Yeah, I think I've echoed this a few times, but with the pace of software development, testing, and delivery, right, and the increase significantly over the last 10 years, you want to think of a holistic solution, again, a way to manage all the compliance, the security in those code changes. How do you do that? I definitely recommend you guys looking at a platform approach, as I've mentioned. The ability to deliver capability, of course, requires innovative approach, to providing secure access to cloud environments, and also the CICD. And then we talked a little bit about zero trust. So it's a lot. When you start bringing up all these different pieces, it can become quite overwhelming. So think simplification, right? Simplifying down, taking a look at the platform, evaluating whether it can cover all these elements. That way you can easily train your resources, right? You don't have to have so many resources to manage, all these different elements of security. I would say, from a takeaway perspective, that's something I would like to make sure you all have.
Thank you, Corinne. Shri?
There's a couple of them, Ish. I think one of the things is security should be part of the design of any cloud, but otherwise it's going to be very difficult for any customers. Because the moment you open it up, there is something that's missing. If something happens, then there's a big risk to that. So that's the fundamental and the most important thing. And second thing is leverage as much possible native tools and use the industry leading tools for complementing anything that is not available from a native tools from these CSPs. And most importantly, look at the compliance. And continuous governance is a very, very key element to anything that you do on the cloud. Regularly looking at it and what's happening, be the compliance risk or a container drift or a host not vulnerabilities on the cloud, attack surfaces, which is being scanned continuously to identify the gaps. So these are some of the things I think has to be very regular from a governance point of view.
Great, thank you. So adding to what all of you've talked about, I believe most organizations see that the cloud and the growth are more or less synonymous in the future. Something we need to all recognize that if you can't secure where you're going to be growing into, then just introducing a whole lot of unnecessary risk for the organization, it's going to be a challenge. Here's some of my takeaways to help make this cloud shift more seamless. I'm going back to something that Corinne talked about earlier. Minimize the number of tools. We got to keep that simple. The more tools you have, the more complexity it was. If I go back to the old days of managing a SOC, you had individuals each looking at their own things, but how do you pull it all together to really determine what's going on, from a breach standpoint? Again, focus on automation as necessary. Use these capabilities to help, have you focus on the real matters rather than the frivolous stuff. Going to what Corinne and Sri, you talked about, implement a governance model to reduce that security friction. I think this is really key as we move forward into this new age. And Corinne, going back to something you said, shift left and take a DevSecOps approach. I love that. And one thing that I think we all recognize that in this day and age, breaches are going to happen. You can build this moat around your company, your enterprise. There's still going to be issues. How do you now secure, your containers, your data, your access? I think Mike talked about zero trust as well, and the Sassy model. How do you pull that together to protect your enterprise? And you have to kind of look at this up front. This is not just an afterthought. The old school days, I got my firewall, I'm good. No, it doesn't work that way anymore. We have to really look at this differently. And I think most importantly, leveraging a partner who has the expertise to help you in this journey. It's not simple, and it's essential. So I think that's really, my takeaways. And what I'd like to do is thank our panelists, Mike, Corinne, and Sri. And of course, let's not forget Adriana and then Annalisa for help managing this whole session and keeping us all in line. Adriana, over to you.
Thanks, Naresh. Thank you to all of today's speakers and participants. We hope you enjoyed this session as much as we did. A special thank you to HCL and Palo Alto Networks and their teams for partnering with us. A replay of Avasant's digital forum and the slides shared today will be emailed to all attendees shortly and will also be available on our events page. Thank you again to everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at another event soon. Cheers.